702.
It's really refreshing to see the investment industry start to adjust its view on South Africa as a place that is good to grow money. The Chief Executive Confidence Index came out today. Somebody does that, and that showed that CEOs are feeling considerably more optimistic. Business confidence is beginning to perk up. Consumer confidence is perking up. And so is the confidence of Andrew Canter, the Chief Investment Officer of Futuregrowth Asset Management. A couple of years ago now, Andrew, you were very critical, for example, of some state-owned enterprises, and you said you were worried about governance and you were really concerned about committing your investors' money into lending to some of them. But South Africa seems to have turned a very, very significant corner, and it's an observation you make in this week's Financial Mail.
Yeah, so thanks, Bruce. I was reflecting that, we've all had this sense of this weight on our shoulders for nearly a decade of decay and lost opportunity. We've only had kind of 3 months of having turned the corner, but when you look back on what we've learned and what didn't happen, you don't have to be all pessimistic about it. I mean, the whole SOE debate from Future's point of view was about, should we lend money to the SOEs? Do they have governance at all? And is it reasonable? Well, we assessed 4 SOEs in detail, and we cleared them. That was without prejudice or fear or favor or being told what to do. We actually did assess their governance, and subject to some relatively small changes, IDC, DBSA, Land Bank, and even Sunroll have good governance practices and policies. We've never cleared Eskom and Transnet. They're in the middle of some very big charges and allegations to be investigated. But that's 4 out of 6, and that's not a bad record. So I was kind of reflecting that maybe it's time to take a view of what went right rather than what went wrong.
South Africa's constitution, judiciary standing the test, the free press playing a critical role, democracy itself playing a critical role, civil society doing its ultimate to really put pressure on political players, and of course key institutions like the National Treasury, for example, holding on very tightly, the Reserve Bank, and then Lesitja Kganyago fighting that particular fight, the judiciary, and also business and labor and coming to this party as well. There was a huge level of cohesion during the darkest times of 2016-17.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was cohesion as much as individuals in each of their realms playing the role that they should play at that moment of history. Sure. The academic reports. I mean, we have to. I don't think any of us at the time of the drafting of the Constitution could have understood the power and importance of a free and independent press. Some of us will remember in 2013 that the administration actually tried to squash the power of their free press, and thank goodness didn't get away with it. Because I mean, for internal whistleblowers to leak emails out that became public, that became eventually irrefutable, and the weight of evidence coming down to the ballot box. I mean, the ANC got trounced in the municipal elections in 2016, and the outlook for 2019 was going to be truly shocking. I think it literally helped force the change within the ANC itself. That's democracy in action. That's a positive thing.
Okay, so we talk politics. That political environment has changed. What about the financial environment? We narrowly dodged the full downgrade that came our way. Moody's, in fact, gave us a small upgrade to take us from the very brink of complete junk status. We seem to be being given the benefit of the doubt. Are we doing enough to convince other ratings agencies that we are going to be able to pay our debts over a long period of time?
Okay, so first of all, it's early days, right? You're 3 months into a partially new administration. Let's be clear that there wasn't a wholesale change of the administration, and you're only 3 months into it. You are going into an election year, which is always a difficult time for any political party to start cutting costs. But I think there's a element of faith and confidence that the new administration is going to exercise fiscal control. Just the fact that they're putting the screws to the SOEs that have had the most allegations of malfeasance, not just throwing money at the SOEs such as Eskom and Transnet to bail them out, but say you must make your way in the world, and you must change your governance and improve your practices and be accountable before we give you more support and money. That's a very positive thing. So I think that's why we got a stay of execution on the most recent downgrade. But these things are slow-moving metrics, so you're not going to see upgrades for a few years, and that's going to require economic growth. The bottom line is economic growth improves with confidence. Interest rates have room to fall because the inflation outlook is very benign at the moment, and that might boost growth. Global growth is pretty good. We just didn't ride that bus because of the lack of domestic confidence and capital flight. So, I mean, you could get a picture in a few years' time where you really look a lot better.
And you talk about South Africa has no more governance problems in its public and private sectors than many other economies. And you say that, right now South Africa is in a unique historical position to effect positive change, which gets to the next critical point, that this stuff doesn't just happen on sentiment and feel good. There's really hard work that has to be done, and we can't sit back and expect someone else to do it.
Well, I mean, I think the interesting thing about South Africa, and if you think about the drafting of the Constitution of South Africa in the early 1990s, and that became almost a template for the best practice constitution in the world, I think there's a moment here where we can assess the institutions of state, and I'm hoping that people in government and in their realms of influence are assessing what went wrong and what won't go wrong in the future. When I talk about that our governance issues are no worse than the rest of the world, I mean, it's corporate and it's government. I mean, it's the SOEs and it's the Steinhoffs, and indeed, I mean, the Tiger brands and the listeriosis deaths. I mean, these are things that we as investors can sit around the table in a relatively few rooms with regulators, with the JSE, and improve listing standards, improve reporting requirements, improve disclosures materially, and become a template for the world. I mean, this is, in Europe, you try to get investors together that spread across 18 jurisdictions with 27 different regulators, and it's impossible to achieve an outcome. In South Africa, we can, and we've done it before, sit around the table like big boys and actually move forward and be a template for the world.
Tell me what your concerns are with the comment, I deplore the weak standards in South Africa's listed corporate bond market. Is this specific reference to Steinhoff, or is it bigger than that?
Oh, and it's much bigger than that. This is, I mean, the fact that that the reporting standards for the JSE listed bonds are really non-existent. I mean, that a listed share, if you were to change a director on your board, you have to put out a SENS announcement. A JSE listed bond, the Minister of Water Affairs fired the entire board of Mgeni Water last year and didn't even have to tell anybody. There was no reporting requirements to that. And it's not just that. I mean, changes to a whole ramp of financial and governance metrics that simply don't have to be reported upon. And even if, by the way, you find out something, you have no mechanism under the JSE rules to actually call a bondholders meeting. There's no way to do it right now. So it's a terrible state of affairs for investors to affect their role in civil society of not only protecting their investors and investors generally, but overseeing companies that borrow the money and ultimately protecting society.
Your concern there, of course, is in the case of the bond market, and the bond market, all of us, whether we know it or not, are invested in the bond market if we've got any kind of future savings, any kind of retirement annuity or any kind of pension product, because
that's exactly right.
Our fund managers will give money to people like you to lend to corporates and lend to companies. And if they're up to all kinds of shenanigans and we don't know about it, well, that's our pensions at risk.
Well, that's right. So we all take a lot of comfort from the JSE equity market, and we take that comfort not because the JSE itself is so wonderful in protecting you. They basically are a market where you can buy and sell shares, as we saw this week in the story you're going to talk about later on in the show, what almost got away with. Yep. But the fact is, your shares as an equity investor are the same as management shares, are the same as a pension company shares, and you have pension fund shares, and you have a whole bunch of company law protection that protects you as a minority. There is no such thing as a bondholder. You are ill-informed, you have no protections, you have no ability to act, and your professional investment advisors, me, are almost powerless to protect you. All we can do is do credit assessment at the beginning and hope for the best.
I'm assuming you've gone to Nikki Newton-King, who is the chief executive of the JSE, which runs not only the equity market but the bond market too, and have expressed these concerns?
The JSE well knows our view.
And their response to you?
They're much more positive. In fact, they've stopped listening to narrow groups and started listening to larger groups, institutional investors who have been living through these debacles of the Steinhoffs and the other defaults we've seen, Consolidated Infrastructure Group and African Bank that went bust a few years ago. The investors now have realized that their position is untenable to be able to look after investors, and are now speaking with a common voice to the JSE, who is actually engaging in a very productive way at this point. So at least we're starting to get some forward movement.
Good to hear. Andrew Canter, thank you very much indeed. He is the Chief Investment Officer at Futuregrowth Asset Management. A really nice upbeat view of South Africa, the opportunities that with which South Africa is presented.